Our little corner of the Ohio River Valley has seen dramatic expansion since the start of the series. And while I raced to build the downtown, some of these areas have, quite frankly, just been forgotten. I'm at fault here. I know that. But I think sometimes, you just have to put something down in a spot, even if it's not exactly the perfect, air quotes, fit for a location. It's not the worst problem to have in the game. It's just, I can't help but feel like it's just missing a lot when I look around the cities. So today we're gonna fill some of the gaps. I won't fill every single gap that we've missed along the way, nor do I plan to do that within the next couple of episodes. It's gonna be a pretty much the entire series kind of thing. But I'm gonna fill in some of those very blatant gaps from our starting town and show some love to this town right here. Welcome back, y'all, to the Ohio River Valley. Keeping with the theme of abandoned, but also the theme of expanding, we are going to be building a failed housing project. But Baggy Stew, you just said that you don't want to continue expanding without filling in some of the gaps. I know, I did say that, but I couldn't help myself. I had a vision beamed in my head from the city Skylines gods, and they told me to make this abandoned housing project on the side of a hill. I've also been watching a lot of Alcaris. I don't really know. I don't think I'm pronouncing his name right, but he has an amazing City Skylines 1 series called Altengrad. If you have not seen it, I recommend watching it because it is awesome, very informative, just good City Skylines building in general. It's one of my favorite series ever. He had a video discussing housing projects in the Eastern Bloc, and I thought, well, it's not out of the realm of possibilities for there to be a project similar to that in America. The obvious ones coming to mind are the housing projects in New York City, but also other projects that would be considered failures, such as St. Louis's Pruitt Ego and then Chicago's Cabrini Green projects. This project that I'm building right now is definitely going to be more along the lines of those, as this is no longer a maintained residency and nobody's living here. I would assume this project was planned and built in the 60s, 70s, at which point it was largely completed, even to the point of having people move in, but for one reason or another, the city ran out of money to continue funding it, and it costs money to tear it down, it costs money to keep maintaining it, so it's been essentially left here to rot. That's my justification for why I'm building the thing anyways. If you guys have any ideas on why this thing would still be around, let me know in the comments. Now let's talk about the actual build. I'm using the static ploppables of the Japanese apartment buildings. There's a bunch of them that have similar shapes, but there's a little bit of variety to them, so I thought it'd be great to use for the base of this. And then I grayed them all out, made it look like it was all exposed concrete to give it that sort of, I don't really know if you would call it brutalist. I'm not an architect by any stretch of the imagination, but that utilitarian look. Now that the base of the building is done, we can get to detailing. This structure has been abandoned since the 60s or 70s, so I'm gonna go pretty crazy with the decals and the vegetation. Try to make this place look as overgrown as possible. Here I'm using the Vanilla Curb mod by El Gendo to get some outlines of what I imagine would be, the sidewalks as well as the roads leading to some underground parking for the facility. It was a little tricky at times because the thing is not totally 90-degree angles, so I kind of had to base alignments based off of the building closest to it, but I don't really think it's that noticeable in the end product. But I gotta say, even this is pretty enjoyable. I like the sort of the blockiness of the buildings in contrast with the curviness of these net lanes. I feel like it fits well together and it makes for an interesting design. So now I think I'm just gonna shut up and let you guys listen to some music while I build this thing. it. This might be my favorite build I have ever done. I mean, it, not to toot my own horn or anything, but it just looks so good. And I just feel like it turned out exactly how I envisioned it, so that's just great. Now you probably saw I built out some roads for the complex. Eventually I will connect it to the overall grid, but there's not really a need to do it right now, so I'm just gonna hold off on that until I get a closer idea of where I want the roads to go. Also, while I have you here, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. It really helped the channel out. Now then, we can continue with the premise of the video. Here we are right at the start of the series. This is the town of Riverrun. The name wasn't always that. At the start, it was called Riverrun. And, you know, as time has gone by, they've condensed it down to Riverrun. Just shorter form of Riverrun, I guess you could say. But back to what we were actually doing in Riverrun. I am trying to build out a small little commercial space, like a mini town center, I guess you could think of it as. It's not going to be any big box store items at all, but I like the Smileys, his Main Street assets, and some of the multicultural stuff, so I'm going to put some of that in here. Ultimately, I'm kind of on the fence with how this section goes. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, but I'm essentially going to back up this little Main Street area up against the bridge there. I'm going to add some additional connections onto our little stroad here as well, but essentially, I don't know, it feels a little cramped, so let me know your thoughts. Also, with the addition of the Whataburger and the Raising Cane's, that now makes 4 different fast food restaurants in this part of the town alone. It's kind of a lot, but you know, it's also not unheard of. So let me know your thoughts on that too. Should I space these out a little bit? Just add a little bit more generic buildings over in these spaces? I like the location of the pharmacy. I think that kind of makes sense where it is, so I'm gonna keep that, but the other side of the bridge I'm still on the fence about. And then I like the bike path and pedestrian sidewalk continuing down this way too. I'm gonna bring it all the way up to the bridge going into the older parts of Riverrun. I'm trying to decide if I should continue the bike lane through the bridge or not towards that industrial area with the steel mill. I kind of like the idea of that. But for now, it's going to connect to this little park area that I'm going to build out and all the way up to the bridge, just for a little bit more bike connections, which I, in general, need to do a little bit more of, at least go around and put some more bike parking down. And for the park, we're just going to keep it simple with a little bit of street parking, an actual park spot, and a tennis court. You might remember I said in the first episode I might change the textures for the rails, and I'm finally getting around to doing that now. I'm just going to use one of these dirt path net lanes. I think it looks pretty good on its own. It's relatively easy to reproduce, so we're keeping it this way. And now for something not as glamorous as plopping down some buildings, but we need to connect up our interstate from this side of Turkey Hollow to the end of Riverin. So let's take it to a time lapse. All right, now with the interstate connected up and all the polishing done off screen, I'm going to change pace to focus on the waterfront and the back part of Riverin. What I'm aiming for here is a little bit of light industry, and maybe some activity spaces for people to at least have some kind of place to hang out by the water. But before I do that, I gotta lay out the roads. I like using the retaining wall now. It's actually started growing on me. Before I never used to touch the thing, but now, I enjoy it. And I'll add some keys, as this likely was once more of an industrial area. Since we're on the river, and at this point I've built a few boat ramps and some docks, I figured why not have a place where people can go to get their boats repaired. So I believe I'm using the Park Ranger garage there as the base for like a little bit of a light warehouse. And I placed down some trailers and some boats here just to show, this is probably a place where customers leave their boats waiting for it to get repaired. I place a fence around the property for security reasons, as well as some industrial props to clutter the area. just across the street, I'm gonna make a little, I guess like a sand depot, I guess is the best way to explain it. I just needed something to fill the gap here, and I think this turns out nice. I'm using the ore shelters there, and then I'll put down a few of these sand pile props, and then using Move It, I just lower them down to, make it look like there's not as much sand as these piles actually have, because they're pretty big for what I'm looking for. After that, I changed the color of the tents to a bit of a darker blue. I feel like this is a pretty common color for these tarps. And then I'll put down some of these decals just to mess the place up, make it look like it's just caked in sand, as well as, dirty grass, dry grass. And then from there, I give it the old baggy stew special, putting down some vegetation in places the owners don't really care about as much. But, it looks nice without, a few Z fighting errors there, but it fills the gap. And then from there, I put some houses down on this corner. I don't want to dedicate too much time here because it's kind of the same thing as I've been doing around most of the build now. But, it deserved at least a minute. So, in particular, I like the common backyard that these houses get by the end of the detailing. Yeah, like I said, nothing special, but it fills out the area, and it's kind of an interesting little thing to look at on the waterfront. Maybe this was a little bit denser before or something. I'm not really sure, but I think it's a little quiet corner of the area, minus the bridge, of course. Zooming into our cookie cutter neighborhood from episode 3, I got a comment from MK Mitten 65, and he says that the tire marks for the construction zones would probably be on the other side of the road here if the dump trucks are coming out of the dirty lot, and I have to say that makes a whole lot of sense to me, so we're making that change now. Sure, it might be 4 episodes later, but I got to it eventually. Also, I've come back to revisit our tree nursery from episode 3 as well, and I've changed the season back to summer, so we can see there is a little bit of a difference in the plants here. It's a little bit more lively than when I initially made it in fall. I was just filling out an empty lot here when I kind of got an idea for something more than just, dirt and trees, so I started recording it. I'm imagining this used to be some kind of industrial lot that's recently been demolished. So we have these these like rubble pillars here, and then I'll put down some of that like concrete rubble around the way just to show, it's just been demolished. But I think it's kind of interesting and better than just a grass lot. And given that side of the river is now like deconstructed industrial and I guess limited industrial, I decided this side will be a residential area. I imagine this would have at one point been more industrial, but they decided to rezone it into some residential lots for some people to have, some nice homes on the water. And with these houses being right up against the water, I wanted to give them a few docks. They're not fancy docks by any means. I'm just using the wooden piers, but I think it looks nice. It at least shows that these are some docks that these people can put their boats in. And then I'll separate out the lots with fences and vegetation just to give it a feel that they have some kind of lots here that are clearly divided, but it's not just, copy-paste fences. Once I detail the row of houses, I'll put down a city park here. I imagine this would be a pretty popular place for the citizens of this part of town to come and cool off by the water. They can, dip their feet in the river if they really want to, and just, have a place to spend some time after a long day of work or on a nice, sunny, warm day on the weekend. Alright, and here's this section of the river completed. I went back in and put a few paths down for some of these houses with the docks. I feel like it just helps tie the whole thing together just a little bit more. And now from here, I want to move back over to Turkey Hollow, the satellite city this side of the river, to build out some more industrial zoning. Here we are at the little corner here in Turkey Hollow where I'm clearing out some of these trees. This is going to be the spot where I have some industrial going on. I'm thinking probably warehouses and light industry. I think it would make sense for this area having a close connection to the interstate right there. So let's cut to a time lapse before we get to the end of the video. All right, and here's our detailed industrial zone with mainly it's warehouses, but I also added the taxi depot and the compact bus station from the City Stations DLC, as well as that bottling plant. I feel like that would be somewhat of a lower pollution site to have close by to some residential. And then to end off the episode, I just wanted to show this empty lot that I'm building out. With the introduction of the interstate into the town, some of these neighborhoods had to be demolished with, eminent domain and all that jazz. So, I wanted to show kind of the aftermath of what it looks like and just, how barren it is. It's kind of a sad sight to see. Maybe a necessary one, but, it's still sad. Alright, but that'll complete today's episode. There wasn't any drastic changes to the city in my opinion, but I feel like there was some much needed infrastructure connections and some pretty cool detailing. Next week's episode will be a little bit different. I'm trying to lessen the scope of what I build in each episode, so I feel like it's more consumable, and hopefully, it doesn't take 10 years to edit, because so far all of the videos that I've done have been pretty big behemoths. But with that said, I want to thank you all for taking the time to watch today. Please leave a like and consider subscribing if you like what you've seen today. Also, leave a comment on what you like, what you don't like, maybe some suggestions. I know it takes me a little while to get to these suggestions, but I promise I see them and I work to get them added into the builds. And with that, I'll leave you all with some cinematics and some music, and I hope you all have a good one.